Ernie. Thanks for joining me on Yachting USA. What a pleasure to be in your shipyard today. So I'm with Ernest D'Alto, the president of Thunderbolt Marine. This is a shipyard I've been coming to for decades. And this is on the heels of a really nice USSA shipyard junket. We were here walking your yard yesterday.
It was a really nice event.
It was a really nice event. Big call out to Frank and to Joe and to Tom and everybody else associated with USSA. Of course, you had Verge Yachting, Anita, and of course I'm going to do this, right? Nick, thank you. Who have really stepped up. Tess as well. These guys really came together to put a spotlight on Savannah. It's been a couple years since I've been up here. I think I was mentioning the last time I was up here was about maybe 2.5, 3 years ago, and was working with Captain Jeff Guyman. He had a boat in here, and that was cool. But you've been involved with the yard now for how long?
I've been here for about 17 years now.
17 years.
So I think in the current capacity, probably closer to 6, but It's been a little while.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. That's really cool. So your current capacity is the president of the shipyard.
President, correct. Yes,
yeah. And you've got a great staff. I ran into a couple guys I've known for a long time, and I thought that was really cool to see that talent here. Some people have been here for a very long time. And I think that is a hallmark of a well-managed, well-run shipyard when you retain your people so long.
Absolutely. It's a really strong team, and we'd be crazy to try to do it without them. So, yeah, we do everything we can to hang on to these folks.
Yeah, no, as you should. So those that watch my show and enjoy what we talk about, a lot of it is because we go back in time a little bit, and then that sets the table, so to speak, for where we are today and where things are going. So you and I were talking yesterday. I told you I go back in time here to the days that Palmer Johnson owned this facility, who they were not the first owners or operators of this facility. There were others before them, as I understand it.
That's correct.
And then it's evolved from their stewardship. There was one or two others that were involved, I believe, before Thunderbolt became Thunderbolt.
That's correct, yeah. And again, it's like drawing blank on some of the names that I need to drop here.
That's all right. The most important one is Thunderbolt.
The most important one to us, of course.
Of course, absolutely.
Yeah, it's been used to build tugs in the past. They've built barges here in the past. Again, a lot of the folks who have been here, you mentioned them being here for a while, and they're a lot closer to those Palmer Johnson days and some of that history than I am. But again, the property's been owned by the Honey family since '65. And
wow.
They leased it out again to Palmer Johnson and others, and decided to take that back and put it to work for ourselves.
And this is a multi-generational family, isn't it?
It is. Yes.
Yeah, which we like to talk about that. I think that's really important because when I started in the industry way back when, one of the hallmarks, I think one of the cool things about this industry were that so many of the shipyards were owned by families and oftentimes multi-generational. And what you saw, I don't want to use the word mom and pop in the context of lack of professionalism, but they were culturally smaller and more passionate about what they were doing because it was what they knew, what they loved, was in the DNA, so to speak.
Yeah, there's a lot invested.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's the challenge we have today when you see so many big corporations coming in and buying up these shipyards corporately, these M&As, these mergers and acquisitions. The culture is what I hope to see preserved, because once it becomes a completely corporate culture, I think some of that gets diluted. Some of the passion that goes into building a handcrafted or repairing a handcrafted yacht becomes diluted. I think the craftsmanship and the beauty of these vessels, these floating pieces of artwork, come from that culture of craftsmanship and passion.
I think the passion is definitely here. Again, Mr. Honey has continued to invest in the facility, and I know that we're all very proud of it. And I think that the culture is important. I think it does stem from the fact that Mr. Honey is still actively involved. He's still close to it. He'll come down regularly and spend time with everybody. And I think that we all are more of that family than we are that corporation.
So, good. That was evident. I've been in a lot of shipyards in my career, and that's a privilege for sure. And I have to admit that yesterday's tour, when we're walking around, I started looking up the skirts a little bit. I was looking in the corners and paying attention to how things were. And we all put on our best face, right, when we have a group of people coming, which you'd expect. But I would tell you that, Ernie, that things that I saw in your joiner shops and in your paint shops and in your machine shops, materials and equipment well maintained, done properly. You can't put lipstick on a pig when you don't do the right things. And you've done the right things in the shipyard. The people have a lot of pride in their workspaces and obviously a lot of pride in the workmanship they do.
Right. It would have been impossible to get it in condition for a tour had it not been
right
in order to begin with. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's something that we hear a lot, and we're very proud of. I think that because it's not that industrial environment, and it is to a degree, the surrounding area, everything's welcoming, and it's a little bit quieter and calmer, and having everything neat and just right. And it's not quite a state park, but we'll do what we can.
No, it's not, nor should it be. But it brings you a little bit of that Southern hospitality, which is Georgia, which is Savannah, which is this part of the world, Thunderbolt.
So that's something we're really proud of too, and I hope you could appreciate the fact that it's very genuine.
Oh, no question.
We're not training the people or teaching them; they're good people out there.
No question about it. Salt of the earth for sure. Let me go back in time a little bit. Just tell us a little bit about your career path. You and I were talking earlier, and you basically said you more or less stumbled into the wonderful world of yachting. Yeah. What did that look like? Where'd you come from, and how'd you come into this space?
It's a long story, but basically, I had dated myself a little bit, but I had a classified ad, and I was looking at a job in the paper. And I am a little bit artsy, and it was for somebody to do artwork for a sign company. And I showed up for that job and was pretty quickly dismissed without having looked at anything I'd done. But anyway, so I was licking my wounds on the way home. And there was another ad. I had done some construction work. I worked in Staten Island for a little while. This is currently in New Jersey. So I saw another ad. And basically at the time, main ship, Lures, Mainship, Silverton, Hunter, all under the same umbrella.
Right.
The main ship was growing. The facility in Marlborough, New Jersey, was getting ready to expand. So they were building a production facility. They were taking some outbuildings and renovating them. So they were looking for someone to do some construction. On the way home, I stopped to do that. I met a gentleman by the name of Milt Day, who was in charge of heading up the wood shop, or the mill. And he put me on to help build out the offices and do some construction work. And when that was done, he asked me to stay on. So I worked in that wood shop, and we did that for a while.
And which of the companies was this?
Ironically, in Marlborough, we were trying to build up the main ship line. But at the time, we were building the 34 Silvertons there, and we were building a bunch of the Lures there at the same time. So we had that model mix, if you will.
Yeah.
Again, that growth really took off, and the building that they built was exceptional, and we were running, if I'm not mistaken, 5 lines of production at the time.
I think I mentioned to you that earlier last year, I sat down at John Lure's home in St. Augustine, and he and I had a really nice conversation. I certainly didn't know what I didn't know when it came to Mr. Lure's and his boat building legacy. And wow, what an education to understand where he and his brother Warren came from. Warren's sailing accomplishments, setting a world record for delivering a boat from, I think, San Francisco around the
Horn there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, there was no Panama Canal, or that was full on sailing the Southern Ocean and all of that.
Yeah. He's a pretty interesting gentleman. Yeah. Both of them.
Yeah, for sure. And the number, for what it matters, somewhere north of 54,000 boats delivered through all of his companies in his career, in his tenure. Yeah. And yeah, amazing.
And again, as you mentioned, underestimated. Yeah.
Completely.
And I think the history here is similar.
Yeah.
I think that, again, Mr. Honey's contribution to the industry is pretty enormous as well.
Yeah.
And again, having the opportunity to step back and talk about where I've come from, these are two of the best people in the industry. I've had the pleasure of working with both of them, and it explains why since '85, I've only had 2 bosses.
Hey, imagine that.
Wow. That's where, yeah.
Wow. It's funny because I started nautical structures in 1986 in the back of my dad's shop. And for the next 35 years, I didn't have any other bosses. It was my business, and I brought in a business partner, a great guy by the name of Bob Boleen. And he and I ran that business together. And it's just been 3.5 years since I left that. What an education that was, and what a privilege that was during that tenure to work in so many facilities, including this one right here. Uh-huh. But Yeah, to think that you've been with these two entities. How long did you stay with the Lures Main Ship Silverton organization?
I think it's about 24 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
All up in New Jersey, or did you come down to the Florida yards?
No,
eventually?
so basically we grew that facility, and in the 90s we had the Gulf War broke out. They imposed a luxury tax, and it really devastated the industry.
Oh, it killed the industry.
So we found ourselves in a position where we went from 5 buildings in New Jersey to 4 to 3 to 2, and we went back to the original building. We're doing everything out of there and slowed that production down as much as we could. And then the decision was made that it would be wiser to take the operation, grab a handful of people with knowledge, and move it to St. Augustine, Florida. So I think I was one of 14 people who made that transition down there to introduce the main ships, or the boats that we were building, to the folks in Florida.
Wow.
Yeah,
wow. So. Interesting parallel here, too. I sat during the Palm Beach Boat Show with Pat Healy, Viking Yachts, and he was telling me the same thing with the luxury tax in 1992. They went from just over 1,000 employees to just under 80. And you think about, and you running a shipyard, you can imagine what that looks like to try to keep that business alive and somewhat viable and experience such a reduction. And so in the business of yachting, what interesting lessons to take away. I'm sure you use those lessons today in running this shipyard, understanding what it is to deal with your overheads, your expenses, your
those
opportunities.
And flows, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Challenges.
Big congratulations to still be in business at the end of something like that. Not everybody survived it. Right. Wow. So that's what brought you to St. Augustine.
So that brought me to St. Augustine, and we had gotten the project or the products introduced down there and grew it. And one of the interesting things about St. Augustine is being on the water. If you think you've got this 60-mile radius around your facility that you like to draw employees from, number one, you're on the water, so you only have half that circle.
That's right.
And then it's a transient town. So there's a lot of people coming and going. So it felt like every time we got over 400 people, the wheels came off. So the decision was made to try to start up a facility, a satellite facility that would be close enough to the mothership for them to keep their eye on,
right,
but far enough away that we weren't drawing from the same labor pool. And we basically found a location in Midway, Georgia, where they used to manufacture tractor trailer bodies.
Okay.
And they were made out of fiberglass and wood. So the facility was wide open with no obstructions. It also had a 10,000-gallon resin tank already in place. We were able to hit the ground running. And I was given the opportunity to run that facility. And we did that for about 7 years.
And which brand was built there?
The majority of it was main ship. Okay. So the 34s, trawler, the 34 pilot. We did the 30 pilots there. We actually did a small number of 29-foot sailboats for a while. So yeah, most of the main ship stuff, mostly the smaller ones. We're building those in like on a 3-day rate, 5-day rate, depending on the model.
So Ernie, one of the interesting parallels I'm picking up here is you're in Savannah now, coming from St. Augustine, two of the most historic cities in the entire nation, both south of the Mason-Dixon line and with incredible histories. So is that just a coincidental? Just one of those
just really lucky.
Things in lucky in life kind of thing, right?
Lucky to land at two really interesting places.
Yeah, yeah. Tybee Island, which is right here, played a huge role during the Revolutionary War, if remember my history.
And the property here has as well. I think that it's come up in a couple conversations, maybe yesterday during the tour. And I'm not a historian by any stretch of the imagination, but I know that they had a battery of cannons out here where we have the marina right now.
Oh, wow.
And I think I had mentioned to a couple of folks also that we have a local historian who's anxious to dig it up because he's convinced we still have cannonballs out there.
I bet you do. Wouldn't that be cool?
I'm not sure it's going to happen anytime soon.
So this is amazing because I didn't know this about you, that you had this history with main ship and Silverton and all of that and Mr. Lures. Something that obviously moved you from your operation there and brought you to Thunderbolt. What was that? What did that look like?
So again, the economy.
Economy, okay.
Economy. So basically 2007, 2008, Ralph Heil, who's the former president here.
Yes, I remember Ralph.
I really owe a debt of gratitude also. He had done a tour and he came out to check out our facility. And I guess we impressed him enough that when he found out that we were going to move the main ship line back to St. Augustine, he's like, you have to come see me. So I did, and we talked a little bit, and he takes over. So I was afforded an opportunity here. And again, really grateful to him because he created an opportunity so that I'd be here when the real opportunity presented itself.
Now that's leadership.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I remember Ralph. And another gentleman, Eric Haverly, was here when I was working here.
Right.
I thought he was a pretty strong guy in running and managing a shipyard.
Yeah, again, a name you hear all the time, and a little bit before me, so
Yeah.
I don't know him very well. I have had the pleasure of meeting him at a couple social events, but don't know him as well as I should.
One of the good guys for sure. So what role did you take on when you came up to Thunderbolt?
Basically, I started out working in the wood shop, and we had a situation where one of the leads had injured themselves and was going to be out for a little while. And I made the transition to running the mechanical department. So I ran the machinist for a little while. And shortly after that, I was afforded the opportunity to take on the small boat side. And again, they're not small, but anything that was in the travel lift, I would focus on. And it created the opportunity for Ralph to put his focus on the bigger boats. So I did that under his tutelage for a while, and then I guess the rest is history.
Yeah. You basically saw his tenure, and Thunderbolt Marine became Thunderbolt Marine. You took on the role of president, you said
I think it's about 6 years ago. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Completely different space you're working in then.
Those are some big shoes.
Yeah, for sure. In a very, what I describe as a niche and unique shipyard. Comes with all the trappings of that, the opportunities and the challenges.
Yeah, it's definitely a different animal. Coming from production, being as comfortable as I was, there's a lot to on this side for sure.
So when I think about doing business in Savannah and the shipyards up here, we'll talk about your shipyard in a minute, but I want to talk about the infrastructure that you're existing under. What is it like to bring in the trades, the people, the craftsmen that you need for doing the work you do in the shipyard? How dependent are you on the subcontractors versus how dependent are you on your individual labor force that's under your payroll?
I think that where we're at right now it is a challenge. I'm sure the majority of people that you speak to will tell you that finding the people that you need really is a challenge. And we're constantly looking for new people, constantly looking for that talent. So as it stands right now, we take on as much as we can, and it's not enough to keep the yard full. And, we have to lean a lot on the subcontractors to take on the bigger projects, because with the staff of about 60, it doesn't take long to keep them busy. It falls to the contractors after that.
Okay, cool. Is it a challenge, or have enough subcontractors migrated into the Savannah area that you have got a pool to work from?
Oh, we've got a good pool to work from, for sure. It took a little while. I think that really one of the triggers was Savannah Yachting Center when they came to town, because their model was to be solely subcontractors. A lot of folks started to look at the area, and some of them clearly knew that we were here already and we had worked with already. But it brought a lot of people from Florida up to plant the flag and to grow their businesses up here in the Savannah area.
Yeah, I got a nice friendship with Tom McGowan, who owns Engineered Yachting Services, EYS, and he speaks highly of coming into the shipyard, working in the shipyard. Is flat out said he feels like he's part of the family here when he's working here. And if that story repeats itself with the other subcontractors, it speaks a lot.
I really think it does. I think it does. And yeah, he's a great example. I think that what they're doing here is exceptional. And the team that he's built up here is pretty large,
right.
Substantial.
That's the conversation. Coming from South Florida myself, and having been part of the ownership group of a manufacturing entity that was doing business around the world and trying to figure out where you plant your flag, where you need to put your resources, there's a little bit of a business risk when you say, okay, I'm going to stop driving my people up 95. I'm going to encourage them to buy a home, set up shop, basically be here. And from everything I can tell, it's really paid off.
I think it has. And again, there was really quite a footprint to begin with. And as we talk about Palmer Johnson, we talked about the minesweepers that have been built here in the past. Marine is not new to the area.
No.
Obviously, we've been here a long time, and there's always been support.
So let's talk about the shipyard's capabilities, and they're significant. Where do you draw the line on the boats you bring in? I don't see, and I wouldn't expect to see a lot of small boats in here. the 20, 30-foot center consoles and things like that. And at some point in time, your lift is going to top out in its capacity. So I'm guessing somewhere around 50 or 55 meters, 60 meters is your top end. What's that look like? What's your window?
We have hauled 60 meters, but it really does tax our capabilities. So again, the sweet spot, I don't know if you heard it on the tour, for us, it's 175. And
Okay.
those are the boats that we're able to move around the yard without too much trouble. The sinker lift itself is capable of lifting 1,200 tons. But and actually we had its capacity increased also. But the real limiting factor is being able to move the boats around. So that transfer table that we have is 95 feet.
Yeah.
And having bigger boats extended beyond that, we had to develop a system that would support them. And we've done that now. And up to 175, we could pretty comfortably move everything around the yard. When you get boats with big bowsprits and other things that stick out, that shell game becomes much harder.
It would be, I would imagine. I was looking at that railway system, and that is a cool piece of, it's historic too. It's been there for a while, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and yet it's so utilitarian, and it gives you a lot of capacity as far as what you're capable of doing.
Simple works.
Simple works. Keep it simple. Yeah, kiss it. So you've got that. So that's, I guess, once you get into the larger, you've got Savannah Yachting Center up the Savannah River, and that's what they're set up for. They're really not interested in the 40, 30 meter boats. That doesn't work for them.
I don't think so. Or at least I hope not.
No, I don't think it does. And knowing the culture of that place, I think they're happy to be in the larger yacht size. Mm-hmm. And with the new marina going across, IGY has put in that with a 1,200 foot face stock and 60 feet of depth there. They can put the big boats there. That's a good place, which I think is great for the whole area, because if you start creating Savannah truly as a yachting destination, large yacht destination, that I think is part of the magic in keeping the shipyard full.
I agree. And we're actually looking forward to that. We really are. Again, I'd like for everybody to know about us. I think we're still the best kept secret.
I think so too. And that's one of the things I want to talk about, because I was walking around the shipyard and it'd been a while since I really looked at it with a different set of eyes. Mm-hmm. Joe Ramsey's walking me through. So you realize I'm only getting like a small percentage of, not really. Joe's a great guy.
Okay.
Looking at things, we walked through one of the shops, which is obviously a perfectly aligned space for doing spar work when you're dealing with sailing vessels and rigging. You've got an amazing paint shop. We were hoping to do the interview in the paint shop. That would have been so cool, but you're actually doing paint work there today. So we wouldn't have come across if we had the respirators on.
Yeah, it would have been a tougher sell.
Yeah. So it was a shorter conversation.
Yeah, that's for sure.
But no, the paint shop is 80 feet tall, something like that.
So the door on that building is 85. 85. And it's a little bit taller than that, but yeah.
And it's impressive when you stand inside that space.
And again, that was designed around a 60-meter vessel. So that's what we had intended it for, to be able to put those bigger boats in there. And just to give you an idea, it does have 480 light fixtures in there.
Yeah.
So when you're spraying, there's no shadows. It's unique.
No, it's a beautiful facility. No question about that. That's a huge resource for you. But you've got a metal shop capable of doing basic all the fabrications you need.
Sure.
You've got a joiner shop, and you can do the interior woodworking and finish work and support these trades coming to do that. I didn't really see anything that's missing here that would let you come in and prevent you from doing a full refit.
Oh, there's nothing to keep you from doing a full refit. Again, the biggest obstacle is probably the number of boats in the yard, because obviously we have a limited staff. And if you're working on a bunch of small projects, obviously small projects for a lot of boats consumes that staff pretty quickly. When it comes to full refit, again, working with outside contractors, working with partners, we have the support group necessary to take on pretty much anything.
So can an owner bring his boat to your shipyard with his project manager and run his own refit? Or how do you like to do this work? What's the culture of this shipyard as far as getting work done here?
Actually, it seems like we're in a bit of a transition, and there are a lot of different vessels with different programs. Historically, we've tried to do everything ourselves and manage it for them, or take advantage of our project managers to drive the project for them. or in conjunction with the captains. What we're seeing now is, yes, we have swung the doors open a little bit, where in the past maybe we wouldn't have considered it. But we've got a vessel in the yard that right now is doing very much what you just described. They're using their own people. We're there for support, but they're using their own people to do the refit. So,
fantastic.
So I'd like to think that we're happy to talk about anything. There's nothing you can't do.
And the conversation about, I don't know if using the word enticing is the right one. Maybe it is. Vessels to consider coming up from South Florida or from the Gulf of Mexico or from other places to do the work here. From where I'm living in the Fort Lauderdale area, it's 24 hours up the Gulf Stream and right up the river to get here. It's not a big ask.
Well, I think the challenges seem to come from sometimes captains and management companies. A lot of people, home base is Florida. So leaving home to do the work is not always inviting. So sometimes it could be a challenge to get them to make that short jaunt.
Yeah. I think that was part of the USSA, United States Super Yacht Association's purpose this week, was to put a spotlight on the Savannah area and really help people understand that if you're coming in someplace where you're going to, like I just had my little 30-foot boat, had a bottom job done. I was in the yard for 5 days. It didn't matter where it went. I'm in and out, so no big deal. But if you're going to come in for 50 days or 8 months to do a job, then the place you're in starts to matter a little bit more. And I have to say, Savannah is got just about everything you would want as a crew. And I even noticed that you've invested in facilities here to support crew, which I think is really smart. So I walked through a crew house you have right across the street here with a nice backyard and barbecue area and a jacuzzi spa area, large one, a gym, place to play billiards, a kitchen, and what am I missing? You have almost everything there for the crew.
And I think you pretty much touched on everything. There's a large space for people to enjoy sporting events. That's something we see quite a bit.
Yeah.
With international crews, if it's soccer or rugby, they're over there to defend their nation's honor. So
I like that.
Those amenities are available.
And then housing. If you're going to be here for a while, I would think that the cost of housing here has got to be more affordable than what you're going to find in South Florida right now.
And again, I can't speak to South Florida, but I do know that obviously as long as the yard's been here, there's a little niche group that caters to crews and captains and the housing, and they really take care of them. So there are a lot of opportunities. And the thing that's interesting, we talk about it a little bit, if you're health conscious, those people usually stay out at tide. They're paddleboarding, they're at the beach, and they're bicycling. If they're party animals or foodies, they usually end up downtown. And we joke that if they're here to work, they stay in Thunderbolt.
Well, that's what you hope they're here for, to get the work done.
Yeah.
The shipyard, you wanted something new that was here this trip that I hadn't seen before, is the property to the west of us. You're developing it right now, and as I understand, that's going to be a place that you can bring in like large catamarans for storage. And what's the vision going forward with the shipyard? What do you see in the future?
We stumbled onto it a little bit. We had advertised with one of the magazines that speaks to the catamarans and the vessels in the Caribbean, and basically during hurricane season, they need to get out. A lot of the insurance companies are requiring that they be north of St. Mary's.
Yes.
And one of the benefits that we have is our travel lift has a large beam, 28 feet. And all those things combined prove to be a pretty good recipe for getting boats in here during hurricane season. So we were stacking them in the service side. And you mentioned the 30-footers and all that.
Yeah.
This time of year, maybe not so many, but we do cater to all of those as well.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Okay.
You won't see many center consoles, but we do 30 and up for sure. But again, discovered quickly that there was a lot of interest, and we're stacking them 2 and 3 deep, and it was taking up a large portion of the service side for the smaller boats. Decided to take a piece of property that we owned and basically get it ready to do some of those storage projects. Right. And we haven't ruled out other things as well. One of the things that we're looking forward to is developing a much bigger fiberglass and composite shop. I'm starting to work on that. We have a good partnership with fiberglass in the yard right now. But again, I think that we definitely want to improve on those areas of the facility.
Excellent. Wonderful. We started this conversation, and Mr. John Lewis came into the conversation early on remarkable gentleman. You mentioned Mr. Honey has also got quite a legacy. I would dare say very few people know about him. What can you tell us about the owner of this property, other than he's owned it now for 60 years?
Again, he's a very humble gentleman, a very smart man. And when it comes to scale, if you think of the buildings, he dreams bigger than I could ever imagine. And the thing is, he could do anything he puts his mind to.
Love it.
And I think to speak about him, I think that what he's done here in Thunderbolt goes beyond the shipyard. I think that he's tried to do more. And a silly example might be, and there are many, but we had, when we built the buildings in the back, one of the things that was necessary was putting in a new water line. And we put in the water line to feed the fire suppression in the back. That's a benefit that those buildings have that I don't know if a lot of people think about either.
Sure.
But, there's a foam mixing station, complete fire suppression back there. But when we were putting in that water line, he decided there's a nursing home down the block. It's not quite all the way down to the college, but there's a nursing home. And we've got a little park that he put in here in the corner. And he put a sidewalk from the nursing home to the park to ensure that they could take advantage of it and enjoy maybe sitting out there having lunch and seeing the boats go by. Yeah.
You know what? You said it's a silly thing, but I've got to tell you, Ernie, one of the things I talk about in a lot of my shows is what I describe as doing well for others. I think that we sometimes get so caught up in our day-to-day business that we lose sight of or don't think about the things we do or could do to do well for others. And what you just described is so beautiful, because that's exactly what that's all about. Taking the thoughtfulness and the thought and the time to take it just one step further. You didn't have to do it, but it wasn't probably that big of a deal to do it. But maybe for those people in that nursing home, that made a huge difference between their quality of life hanging around the place from being able to get out, take a nice walk, and being comfortable in their environment.
And again, I didn't mean to imply that was a silly idea. It's just that it's probably a small example and one of many where, again, trying to give back to the community and do things the right way.
I applaud that, and I think that is so important. I think that's
always
incumbent upon us if we can, too. And that's fantastic.
Yeah, I think that he really does a lot.
Yeah. So any final thoughts here? What do you see in the next few years of your tenure? What would be your dream?
Again, I think that we need to continue to grow, obviously. Opening up that west side is one of the current projects, and I think that that's important to get that done. We also have talked a little bit about building some shops and bringing in some additional subcontractors. And I think you've heard talk about it elsewhere as well. But that's something that we've got on the drawing board. I think I mentioned to some people during the tour, we have a property here in Thunderbolt, just beyond the crew lounge. And one of the things that we want to do is build a restaurant out there on the water or on the other side of the street, but you'll be able to have water views, eat outside, and anything that we can do to make the boatyard more attractive to our customers. Mr. Honey is game to invest in all of those things. Yes.
It becomes a destination. I think that is the trend, and I think that's very smart planning. You're seeing it more and more. I don't know why it's taken so long for our industry to pay attention to the fact that the crew has such an influence over where they take their boats. You think it's the owner, but it's really the crew more than anything else that drives where these boats come.
And again, when you mentioned the crew lounge earlier, that's really what drove that. The captains will tell you, if the crew's happy, then the captain's happy. You can take an Uber downtown and there's a million things to do.
Sure.
But I don't know if you want to do it every night. So having a small place that you can congregate, cook out with some friends, and maybe get to know some new people, it's a benefit for sure.
I'll leave it at this. Having traveled the world and having the privilege of spending time in a lot of shipyards around the world, I think Thunderbolt is an amazing, remarkable little gem. And I don't even say the gem, it's not in the rough, it's a gem. It's just not maybe as widely known or appreciated as it could or should be. And hopefully people listening to this conversation will take a moment and go, we should check this out, because I think you should.
I think they should as well. I don't have any trouble saying we are a world-class facility.
You are, no question about it. Mm-hmm. You are absolutely a world-class facility, and we're going to do our part to make the world know that this is something to consider, some place to come. And if you're in the area, you should stop in and say hello to you and Judy.
Absolutely.
And get a tour of the yard, understand what's here. And if you're trying to figure out where really should I put my boat, put this on your list. Consider this location. I think this is a brilliant location to come to. I don't see any downside for being here.
Yeah, and I'd like to think that we're already working with most of those outside contractors. So if that is a barrier to entry, we should probably talk about it. But yeah, I hope everybody will take a look at Thunderbolt Marine when considering repair or refit.
Oh, I'm all about it for sure. Ernie, I really appreciate the Southern hospitality here. This has been an amazing week.
It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, this has been fun. And
I want to thank you as well for this opportunity.
thank you. I love what I do, as you can tell.
Good.
And this is all part about lifting up our industry, trying to promote the shipbuilding and the ship repair business here in the United States best I can. And know that